Hi class, so today we are going to talk about the nitrogen cycle, so please go ahead and take out notes number 46. As you know, nitrogen is one of the important nutrients that plants need in order to survive. So nitrogen is an essential nutrient for plants that must be absorbed from the environment. Nitrogen is found in every amino acid and nucleotide, which are used to make all of the plant's proteins and nucleic acids. So on notes number 1, what element is considered an essential nutrient? The answer is nitrogen. Number 2, nitrogen is found in amino acids. What class of biomolecules is made from amino acids? So let's think back on the polymer song. Carbs are made of sugars, we call them saccharides, and nucleic acids are long chains of small nucleotides. Amino acids go together, linked from side to side, to make each kind of protein, also called polypeptides. So number 2, proteins. Number 3, nitrogen is found in nucleotides. What class of biomolecules is made from nucleotides? And nucleic acids are long chains of small nucleotides. So on number 3, nucleic acids. So nitrogen gas, N2, is actually the most common gas in the atmosphere, but plants cannot absorb and use this form of nitrogen. In order for plants to absorb nitrogen, it must first be converted into a different form. Number 4, where is nitrogen gas commonly found? It is found in the atmosphere. Number 5, can plants absorb nitrogen gas directly from the air? No. So, because plants cannot take in or absorb nitrogen gas, they have to change that nitrogen gas into a form that plants can take up. There is a process known as nitrogen fixation, which is the process of converting or changing nitrogen gas into ammonia, NH3. So on number 6, describe nitrogen fixation. It is the process of converting nitrogen gas into ammonia. That is number 6. This is the first step of the nitrogen cycle, and it can happen in a couple of different ways. One way that nitrogen gas can be fixed or changed is when there is lightning. So nitrogen fixation can begin in the air when lightning strikes. There is a large amount of energy in lightning, and the heat that it gives off causes nitrogen to react with hydrogen in ways it would not under normal conditions. So on number 7, what does lightning produce that causes nitrogen to react? It produces heat. However, the most nitrogen fixation is performed by microorganisms in the soil. Micro meaning tiny organisms. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria convert nitrogen gas into other nitrogen compounds that can be absorbed by plants. So on number 8, what performs most nitrogen fixation? The answer is in yellow. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Many of these bacteria actually live inside of the roots of plants. Soybean plants and other legumes contain these bacteria inside of root nodules. So on number 9, where do nitrogen-fixing bacteria often live? The answer is in yellow, roots. So far, we've talked about 2 ways that nitrogen gas can be converted, by lightning and by nitrogen-fixing bacteria. A third way that nitrogen gas can be converted is through decomposers. So whenever plants and animals die, the nitrogen contained in these organisms is digested by decomposers and released into the soil as ammonia. Decomposers prevent the nitrogen from being trapped in the dead plant material and recycle vital nutrients in the ecosystem. So on number 10, this is important. What type of organism recycles nitrogen that would be trapped in dead plants and animals? Decomposers. So let's do a quick little review. So I've talked about 3 different ways that nitrogen gas can be fixed or converted into a form that plants can take up. One of those ways were through lightning. So that's one way. The other way was through decomposers like fungi and bacteria. So there's a second way. The third way is when plants and animals begin to decompose. So there are 3 ways that nitrogen fixation can occur: lightning, decomposers, and animals, and when plants and animals die. All right, we are on the back of your notes now. So on number 11, what type of bacteria competes with plants for nitrogen compounds in the soil? So not only do plants need this nitrogen, there is this other thing, this other bacteria called denitrifying bacteria that also wants that nitrogen, okay? So these type of bacteria, they use those nitrates and ammonia themselves and convert it back into the atmospheric nitrogen gas. These bacteria are an important part of the nitrogen cycle that help replenish the nitrogen gas found in the air. So, on number 11, who competes with those plants? The answer is in green, denitrifying bacteria. Number 11. You can see it in this diagram right here. So when nitrogen fixation occurs, what happens, that denitrifying bacteria will turn it back into that nitrogen gas. Once the nitrogen fixation has occurred, the nitrogen can be absorbed through the roots of the plant. Without the proper amount of nitrogen, the plant would not be able to survive. So on number 12, what part of the plant absorbs nitrogen from the soil? The answer is roots. That is number 12. As you know, many plants are grown by farmers in large quantities, and this can deplete the nitrogen in the soil. So new vocabulary word, the word deplete means to lower. Deplete means to lower. So let me write that down. After a few years of growing these crops, they can start to have trouble growing because there isn't enough nitrogen left in the soil. So on number 13, what happens to the soil after it is used to grow crops for several years? Then the answer is deplete the nitrogen. Number 13, deplete the nitrogen or lower the nitrogen. So because of this, people, farmers rotate their crops through their fields, allowing legumes to grow in each field every few years. These legumes contain nitrogen-fixing bacteria in their roots that replenish the nitrogen available in the soil. The word replenish means to bring back. So on number 14, how do farmers keep nitrogen levels up in the soil? The answer is they rotate their crops. Number 14, rotate their crops. For example, they will grow, let's say they grow corn in one little area for a few years. After that, they'll grow corn in a different area so that old area can just replenish their nitrogen back up again. Now let's talk about some pretty interesting plants like the sundew right here, this Venus flytrap, which a lot of you are probably more familiar with, and the pitcher plants. So in some places like swamps and bogs, the acidity of the soil keeps the level of nitrates very low. In these places, you might find carnivorous plants, plants that eat meat. These plants get their energy from the sun, but they must trap and digest insects to get the nitrogen they need to survive. Number 15. In what ecosystems would you find carnivorous plants? Swamps and bogs. Number 15. Swamps and bogs. Number 16. Where do carnivorous plants get their energy from? Obviously, they get their energy from the sun. Number 16. From the sun. Number 17. Why do carnivorous plants trap insect? To get nitrogen. Number 17. To get nitrogen. You can actually reduce the number of nutrients in the soil in your yard whenever you rake the leaves. Whenever you kind of clean up the yard, put the leaves together. Since leaves do not decompose and return nutrients back to the soil, the amount of nitrogen in your yard can be reduced over time. So on number 18, what reduces nitrogen levels in the soil in your yard? Raking those leaves up. That is number 18. Number 19. What would dead leaves normally do if they weren't raked? Return nutrients. Number 19. Return nutrients. So if plants don't have enough nitrogen, we've talked about this before, you can add fertilizer to the soil. Fertilizers are often used by farmers and gardeners to add nitrogen to the soil. This can help plants grow and produce fruits and vegetables, but fertilizers can also cause problems in the environment. So on number 20, what can you use to add nitrogen back into the soil? Fertilizer. Fertilizer. Number 20. So looking at these three different fertilizers, you have lawn fertilizer, you have this starter fertilizer, you have this all-purpose fertilizer. So we've talked about this one before, so I'm going to circle these three numbers right here. So the first number will always be the nitrogen. The second number will always be the phosphorus. And the third number will always be the potassium. Okay, always, okay? So, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. On your test that you will have next class period, there is a question on the test that asks, out of these three fertilizers, it's different numbers, but for example, out of these three fertilizers, which of these three fertilizers has the most phosphorus, which is that middle number? Is it 4, 27, or 13? Obviously, the answer will be this one right here. Very easy question. So, although fertilizer is very good for plants, makes them grow strong and bright, they could be a huge problem, especially when it gets into the water supply. They can make it too easy for microorganisms like bacteria and algae to grow. When this happens, people, these organisms will deplete the water of oxygen and can cause aquatic and marine life to die because they do not have the oxygen they need. So, on number 21, fertilizer can cause problems when they get into what? When they get into the water supply. So, on number 21, water supply. Number 22, when too many microorganisms grow in the water, what gas is depleted? So what gas is lowered or reduced or decreased? And that is oxygen. Number 22. So if there is no oxygen or not enough oxygen in the water, the fish and the marine life, they won't be able to breathe. They can't breathe. They die. Fish death due to depleted oxygen. This is a picture of dead fish in the ocean due to the fertilizer getting into the water supply. So on number 23, what does this do to fish and other aquatic life? Death. They die. Number 23, they die. Number 23, fish death. So in this picture right here to the right, so this is green water in the Potomac River due to increased levels of cyanobacteria. So with all this fertilizer in the water supply, it's causing these little bacteria to grow in the water. As you can see here, causing the water to look green, which is not good. So like I just said, algae and cyanobacteria also grow on the surface and block light from reaching aquatic plants. Without light, these plants cannot perform photosynthesis and die as a result of the nitrogen pollution. So on number 24, what happens when these organisms grow on the surface? If they're growing on the surface, it's going to block the light from entering through. So number 24, block light. 24, block light. Number 25, without light, what are aquatic plants unable to do? No light, no photosynthesis. So number 25, photosynthesis. So with all of this fertilizer getting into the water supply, number 26, what do we call the addition of too much nitrogen into the environment? All the nitrogen pollution. Number 26. Nitrogen pollution. Once you're done, raise your hand and I will come by and check your notes for a completion grade. After I check your notes, you will then begin a gallery walk answering different questions about the nitrogen cycle. So please take out that half sheet of paper with the Scantron on it. You're going to bubble in your answers as you walk around at the lab stations in the back. Once you are done, please turn it into the bucket. It is for a grade.